You know those DNA kits that people like to gift? Well, most of the time you find out you're 12% Irish and maybe need a little more sunscreen. But sometimes you find out your dad isn't your dad. You've got a couple surprise sisters, and oh yeah, your bio father is a pediatrician who basically inspires your second act as a stand-up comedian and storyteller. That's the story we're digging into today on Family Twist. And trust, it's as funny, heartwarming, and jaw-dropping as it sounds.
And thank you guys so much for making time for me. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. This has been, as you know, these things are an ongoing journey, and I was planning on keeping. So we'll talk a lot about secrets and shame, but
Sure.
the fact that I'm doing a solo show about it is like the antithesis of that.
Oh,
But
wow.
I had this crazy idea that I was going to do it and not tell my parents.
Mm.
I'm almost 50 years old, and I was like, I'm just going to do it on the sly, and they
Yeah.
won't ever know. But
Yeah.
it's a super small world, and the people who I want to invite to the show are like my bio family and my longtime friends whose parents are friends with my parents.
Right.
I stopped being scared. And last week I sort of accidentally and very quickly told my dad that I was doing a festival. And he said, "Oh, is it comedy?" And I said, "No, it's storytelling." And he said, "Oh, do you know the topic yet?" And I didn't say, I've been working on this since May. Of course, I
Right.
knew the topic. I said, "Oh, actually, I'm going to tell our family discovery story." And he goes, "Oh, that's a good topic." I was
Oh,
like, "Oh, that was it? That was the whole thing?" I've been
wow.
worried about this for a month. So at that point, I realized, okay, I can publicize this for real. And then I started thinking that through and realizing that this was a story that a lot of people are obviously very interested in general in DNA, but just the fact that I turned it into a solo show is sort of a meta thing that
Yeah.
taking a secret and making it very much not a secret. Sure.
Go back to why initially did you do a DNA test?
So my sister and I had always suspected, and actually in the show I talk about, there were these clues that then later made sense, that oh, my mom always really encouraged me to do genetic testing before I got pregnant. And I always assumed, and she sort of for cover said, Jews and Tay-Sachs, you really need to make sure you do this genetic testing. But looking back, I realized, oh, she really was worried because she didn't know half of my health history.
Mhm.
And she also, I think, always had this tiny little fear that I might accidentally marry a secret long lost biological half brother.
Yeah.
So when I met my husband, and this is actually a line in the show, she was very curious about where did his dad go to medical school. I later was like, oh, no wonder she was so happy when she found out that my father-in-law went to Buffalo. She was so happy because she's like, okay, I think we're in the clear. But
Wow.
my sister and I had found some clues. So we always suspected, but there was never anything to do about it. But then I remember so clearly in 2017 reading an article about Anne Wojcicki and 23andMe, and I thought, oh, yeah, I'm gonna really find out for sure. I'm gonna do this. And I bought the kit, and I was so brave to buy it. Sure. So I decided that I would know when it was the right time. And I just kept looking at the box, and it looked at me, and then I hid it in a drawer. We moved to a new house, and I hid it in a different drawer. And so years go by. And in the time of those years, I would sometimes think, I know that there's someone out there, and I wonder if I'm like them. I wonder if they're still alive. I wonder if they know that I'm alive. I wonder if they have any interest in ever meeting me. And in what crazy universe, a sperm donor bio dad relationship isn't really a thing. So I couldn't even imagine, but I did wonder, what would that mean and what would that be like? And then in 2021, I attended a women's conference, and it was the pandemic, so it was on Zoom. And there was a science writer speaking about it was a book talk, and her name is Libby Copeland. She has a book called The Lost Family. You guys probably heard of this book. It's how DNA testing is upending our families. The book grabbed me. I ordered a signed copy, but I couldn't wait for the signed copy to arrive from New York. So miraculously, my library had a copy on the shelf, and I went and I got it that day.
Wow.
And devoured the book. It's nonfiction, but I read it like it was Agatha Christie, and I couldn't put it down for 3 days. And then at that point, I knew, like, okay, this is a thing, but I'm feeling more brave again, and I'm going to do it. And so I went to get the kit out of the drawer, and the kit was expired. I sent the kit I had one sent to me, and I also had one sent to my sister. I have a sister who's 4 years younger than me. And we had always kind of assumed that if we were pretty sure we were conceived by sperm donor, had different donors, because she's about 5 inches taller than me, and we look sort of alike, and we sound alike, and we act alike, and we both act like my mom in a lot of ways. But also my sister and I looked different enough that this made sense. And we also, neither one of us look like my dad's family. And my dad has 3 siblings, and I have a lot of cousins on my dad's side, and my grandparents. There's like definitely a family vibe that my sister and I didn't quite match. So that part, we just really assumed it for a long time. When I finally did a test, and Kendall, when I heard your description of you sitting there and getting the email and your heart stops and you look at the link, it's just this moment that I will never forget. I was sitting in my son's bedroom because it was pandemic time, and like I was trying to grab quiet wherever I could find it. And I was sitting in his room at his desk, and this email comes in, and I wasn't even like waiting for the email, I guess, because I didn't know how long it would take. And it was very quick. It was like 3 weeks. And the email subject line said, "Welcome to you," which is so like, they are not beating around the bush. They're like, here it is. Very, immediately, but like with this great sense of, oh, this is it. This is the thing I've been waiting for. I open the email, and it immediately says, "Here's your half sister." Like, it was so clear, half sister.
Wow.
And I had never seen her name. I had no idea who she was, but Facebook is a miraculous thing. And by the wonders of the internet, within, I think, probably 3 minutes, I had been able to sleuth out who she was. I had 2 mutual friends with her, because the Jewish world is really small. So I figured out how those people were connected later, but like immediately I could see that I knew 2 people with her. And then I was also able to see via Facebook that she has a sister. And then I looked at the sister is younger and is on Instagram. So I looked at her Instagram, and I was really, I don't know if alarmed is the right word, but it was very clear that the younger sister and I resemble each other significantly. And she's 15 years younger than me, but if we were the same age, like pictures of her in college and pictures of me in college could be twins.
Wow.
Which is so like, oh, and it was very clear from the younger sister's presence online that she and I would be best friends. And the older sister too, she didn't have as much information about what her interests were, but I could immediately tell that both of these sisters were people who I would really want to get to know. And I also very quickly could see what her maiden name was, and any of the grown men who were on her Facebook list. And there were like maybe 3, I guess they were relatives or other people at the same last name. And one of them was a musician. I was like, it's definitely not a musician. And then the other one was a doctor. And I was like, oh, that's definitely him. And I was able to find his medical practice's website very quickly. And he's a pediatrician. And I had always wanted to be a pediatrician growing up. So it was like, all of these things, it was like dominoes, but it was so quick, and it was all like, oh, of course. And he kept a blog as part of his pediatric practice. I mean, it was like reading my own writing. The way that he writes is like very enthusiastic and a lot of exclamation points, and interested in the same things, like making sure, I mean, he's a pediatrician, so obviously he wants kids to get enough sleep and sunscreen, but like those are things that I've always cared so much about.
Yeah.
And like, I could just tell immediately, I'm like, oh yeah, there he is. And then I didn't know what to do, because I didn't know if his wife and his daughters knew. My parents had no idea that we even suspected. I was pretty sure that my sister did not have the same sperm donor at this point. And I didn't know what to do. So I waited for a whole year before I did anything. I just like sat on it for a year. But in that year, like I would read these blogs, and I would look at my half sisters on social media and like think about, okay, I'm going to at some point work up the nerve to do this. And then I I didn't know what to do because I didn't want to sort of blow his cover if he was keeping it a secret from his family.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to send him a message on Facebook, which he never saw. And because, I mean, his daughters, I don't think want him on, like, I think that's just like he's not on Facebook, so he never saw it. So he never got the message. And finally, I decided that if I wrote him a letter and made it really clear that, like, I was interested in my health history, but, like, I wasn't real, like, that I have my own very loving family, and I wasn't interested in being overwhelming in his life, but that I would be interested in getting to know him if he was interested. And I tried to tread very lightly because I had no idea what he knew or what he was interested or willing. I just had no idea. So I wrote him this letter that I spent weeks on, and I included in the letter a picture of me and my husband and my kids. And I decided that I would mail it to his office in a double envelope. So, like, if his staff opened the first UPS letter, and then they would see that it was for his name and, like, medical records, and just give it to him without anybody else opening that. And that was like a scheme, and the scheme worked because 5 days later, after I mailed it, he called, like, he got it. He called me that day. And and he left a voicemail, and we spoke on the phone, and we spoke for an hour. And it was just so comfortable and normal. And he had known that one baby was born, and which was wild to me. And it turned out that the reason that my half sister was on 23andMe is because they had known, and they were hoping that I would eventually turn up. So, and she had been on it for several years. So I did that. And at that point, I had to tell my parents, of course. Like, I had sort of told myself as this process was happening that if he doesn't want to talk to me, or he just, for whatever reason, is not, I had read in Libby's book, in The Lost Family, I knew all of the ways in which this could go. You know, there are people who just don't have space for whatever reason for new people in their life. And I understood that that was a possibility. And I decided that if it wasn't going to work out, then maybe I wouldn't need to tell my parents if this was going to end up not being a thing. But as soon as I talked to him, and he was so warm and welcoming and really understanding of the fact that I needed to take it a little slow while I figured out about sharing with my parents what I had discovered. So my parents were on a 3-week cruise, and when they came back, they had COVID. So there was like another week where I had to wait. And I remember the night before, I decided I had this whole plan. I was going to email them, because that way they could read the email and decide amongst themselves if they were upset, if they weren't upset, if they wanted to talk about it with each other before they reached out to me and my sister. Like, I wanted to give them space to process this information before we had to, like, have a phone call. And they live in one state, and my sister's in the third state. Like, none of us are in the same place. And I wrote them this email, and I sent it on a Friday afternoon. And, like, literally 30 seconds later, my mom calls me, and she goes, "So now you know."
Oh, wow.
She was so excited that I knew. And she was also very excited because she wanted to know my health history. Like, she was very, very interested in my health history. And it turns out that my bio dad's parents lived to be 95 and 100. So
Wow.
I was, my mom was super happy about that. And my parents, it turned out we had this, like, very funny thing that it didn't even occur to me until later. So at some point, I put a small profile on one of the, like, Find Your DNA Siblings websites, and it just had my birthday and the city, and I guess, like, to try to find a match. And I guess it's the DNA Sibling Registry. I just, like, for some reason, I looked on their website. I don't even remember why I looked, and there was a second posting with my birth date, but also my sister's birth date, and I was like, did my sister make a profile? And then I'm like, did I do that? Did I make a second listing? I can't remember. 24 hours later, I was at the gym and I was running, and all of a sudden it was like a literal light bulb on top of my head. I was like, oh, my mother made a profile. She's looking too. So then I wondered, had she seen my original listing? I didn't know what she knew. But when I saw that, I became a little bit less anxious, because I realized she's still thinking about it. It's something that she's going to want to know that I found this out.
Right.
So Meanwhile, this is all happening in August of 22. Actually, the first time I spoke to him was exactly 3 years ago this week. And we decided that once I told my parents that he would tell his daughters and his wife. I think his wife knew immediately, but then his daughters, we waited to tell them a few days. Immediately, I talked to my half-sisters on the phone. There was like an immediate connection. And my daughter's bat mitzvah was coming up like in December, and this was in August. Normally, when a bat mitzvah or a bar mitzvah is coming up in a family, I feel like that sort of takes complete precedence of like the whole family is like the kid is working on their Torah portion and the mom is working on the event, and there's a lot of coordination and it's just like invitations and a lot of chaos in the family. The first time that I spoke to him on the phone, again, after I had met his daughters on the phone, and I said, I want to come and I want to meet you guys in New York. And he was like, okay. And I was like, can you make sure with your wife and everybody that like, this is okay? And he said, yes. So then I have a college friend who lives near them. And I hadn't been in touch with her for maybe a year. And I said, can I come visit you the weekend of October 8th? And she was like, well, actually, it's my son's bar mitzvah and I only invited local friends. But if you're going to meet, like, yes, you should absolutely come. So then I had this like a great reason to come for that weekend. And I packed my kids. My husband had something going on. He couldn't come. But like on very short notice, we hopped on a plane and we went to New York. And my kids and I had dinner with him and his wife. The next day or the day after, we all with his daughters, and then one of his daughters has 3 kids, and we met like everybody. And we FaceTimed with my parents, which was so nice and weird, but wonderful. Yeah. And it all just like really felt it felt very surreal, but also it felt like being with them felt very normal. And it kind of reminded me of, when I had my son is 4 years older than my daughter. And in the 4 years that I had an only child, I could not imagine having another kid who I loved as much as the first kid. But then the second she was born, I looked at her and I was like, oh, yeah, of course. Like, it just makes sense. All the pieces fit together. And when I met them all for the first time, I was like, oh, yeah. You can have tons of people in your life who you love and you're connected with, and one doesn't take away from the rest. And I just felt so extremely grateful.
Wow. So it sounds like the dad that raised you dealt with it pretty well.
He really did. I mean, we still don't talk about it. I talk about it more with my mom than with him, but he knows that I'm doing this show about it, and he's been amazing.
Oh, that's
been amazing.
Cool. So
he always knew.
Yeah, I think that's the best scenario.
What my mom said to me early on was, like, as soon as I told them, we like talked about it briefly, and then like my mom and I have talked about it more. But she said, when we did this, the doctor said, you never need to tell your kids. It's not a big deal. It was the 70s. I understand why they kept it a secret, but also I wish that they hadn't, only because once I started putting all of these pieces together, I was able to see myself so much more clearly. It just made lots of other things in my life. Like all of it made so much sense. And like, as this all happened, I'm like, oh, this explains the first time I had dinner with the new bio dad, I found out that he leaves cabinet doors open. And I'm like, oh, I leave cabinet doors open. So there were so many similarities that it was really quite uncanny. And on the second time that I went to New York to visit them, he let me interview. And I prepared a list of like 20 questions and I recorded it. And it was this really meaningful time of, we got to know each other more. And when we were having lunch that day, he knew that so professionally, even though I'm almost 50 years old, I've done a lot of different things in my life, and I am pretty adventurous, and I sometimes stumble into things, and I don't always, I trained as an architect, but it was never my calling. So, but he said to me, he could tell that when I found my thing, that I would really know it, and he was very encouraging about that. I should be open-minded to finding this, whatever this thing is. I stumbled into the world of storytelling and comedy, which is not something that people who are 47 years old usually stumble into. But I did, and I had been at a synagogue event, and I had been given a toast, and a woman came up to me afterwards, and she said, "You are like our own Mrs. Maisel," and I thought it was the best compliment ever. So I took a comedy class, but that was actually pre-pandemic, and then I didn't do anything with it because there was I wasn't leaving. Nobody was doing anything fun, and right after the pandemic, as we were coming out of it, my synagogue needed someone to be an opening act. And because I had taken an improv class and they knew I had taken this comedy class 3 years before, they asked me to do it. And I was really crazy to say yes. And they were crazy to let me do it because I had no idea what I was doing. And I stood up. This was in February of 23. So like right after I had that long lunch with him. But when I was feeling really open-minded and brave about everything, I guess, and I said, sure, I'll do it. And I stood in front of 100 people and talked for 15 minutes and nobody laughed the entire time. Oh. I knew that I had done badly because the rabbi, who is a good friend of mine, he gave me this hug and I recognized the look on his face, but I usually only see it when there has been a death in the family.
Oh, God.
So like I knew I had not done well. And my husband said, I don't want to see you perform again until you get good. So I said, okay, I guess I have to get good. And I felt this challenge to try this new thing. And then I started going to open mic nights. And the fact that I had done this 15-minute show without ever having done an open mic night is bananas, like completely insane. But I think I was in this like weird creative space that I was like willing to try anything at that point. And I had also just had COVID for the first time. So I was like, I'm ready to do everything fun and anything I've ever considered and yes to everything. And then I started going to these open mics and then I really started working on it and I started doing storytelling. And if you or your listeners are familiar with The Moth, which I know lots of podcast people listen to, The Moth Podcast Story Hour, which is both a podcast and a radio show. The Moth has local shows in 30 cities around the country. Applied for and got a job as one of the producers for The Moth here in Birmingham. Cool. And so I'm involved in the storytelling community in a bunch of different capacities and I host my own storytelling shows. And I've continued to do stand-up comedy. And it's been this really wild adventure.
I've got a couple of questions that I want to make sure we get. First, I really want to know, like, so what about your sister you were raised with? What did we find out her story?
So we found out that we were officially half sisters, and which we had suspected. And when she sent in her kit. We didn't find anything. So she has not found her people. But the way that I have felt about it is that when I did this, I had no expectations. I mean, I knew from Libby's book that it may not turn out well, but I wasn't comparing it to anybody that I knew. And I've always thought that I had this really lucky situation, like extremely fortunate, that I don't want my sister, like she has to find herself and it's not that she doesn't want to, she just hasn't yet. And like it took me years of waiting before I actually sent in the kit. And then once I sent in the kit, it took another year before I actually reached out. So like, I know everybody needs to come to this in their own time. So, I mean, this all has made me feel very sort of open about the whole universe that like things will unfold in the time that they are supposed to unfold. But also like, this is not for most, now when people are looking for sperm donors, it is like really, it could be anywhere. But this was a local situation. Like we know the medical school, we know the year. We're like close to the year because we don't know when he graduated, but we know the time that he would have been in medical school. So we'll see. But my sister's been so warm and very, very wonderful about and supportive about me going through this experience. And she and I and my two new half sisters have all had dinner together, and we have a group picture that we all look like we could be sisters. Yeah. So it's really, my sister's been amazing.
So cool.
Excellent. I mean, it's, as you know, there are like so many similarities and differences in everybody's story, from listening to the podcast, where it's like, Kendall obviously does not have the patience that you do because, and actually today is
the day that this is the my I found you day. This is the day that I found my half brother in 2017. So 8 years
Oh
ago.
my goodness.
Yep.
Wow.
So obviously we did everything in fast forward, but
Yeah.
and it's like, of course it's amazing. And Kendall's story, while it's a bit of a roller coaster, I mean, for the most part is positive, but,
Yeah.
and he had a great upbringing with his adoptive parents, but, he's still dealing with, and I think everybody's dealing with some kind of a trauma, because of not knowing and finding out and stuff. And it sounds like this has been absolutely joyful for you, but I'm just curious, in the creation of the one person show, are you exploring any elements of trauma and conflicted feelings and all of that?
So that's a great question. So it's not stand-up comedy, but it is comedic storytelling. So I have tried, there's definitely funny parts with it, and there are very touching parts, but it wasn't ever that there were traumatic parts. But the first time that my bio dad said to me that he was pretty sure he had undiagnosed HA, and I was like, oh, yeah, so that's what this is. So it was this huge revelation that I'm like, oh, this explains so many things about myself. And it would be nice if I had known earlier to have a name to put on this so that I could apparently I've been making accommodations for myself for my entire life. And also the people in my life are very patient with me about my messy rooms and my being late for things. I'm generally really good about remembering to do things, but sometimes I just space out on things. I feel like I'm a very accomplished and creative and fun person, but the things with especially adult ADHD in women, it describes me so perfectly that I wonder how could I have not known this before? And it's for both my strengths and my weaknesses. So I think I probably would have done better in high school and definitely in college if I had known that. So, but also I feel like I can't unwind any of it, and I can't tease it apart because it's my story is it unfolded the way it unfolded, and now I know these things about myself.
How did
my parents I don't even think my parents know that I think I have ADHD. So if they're listening to this podcast, now you know. And when they watch the show, now they'll know.
Well, I hope they listen.
I say it I say it in the show.
Yeah.
But it also it doesn't feel like a huge shock. I have a very close friend of mine who's telling me for years, she's like, you definitely have ADHD.
Another one.
Now, I'm curious, how did you tell your kids? Because it kind of happened quickly with having that conversation with your bio dad, and all of a sudden you're flying to New York and having, dinner with grandpa.
Yeah. So, I mean, my kids they are used to having weird and unexpected adventures with me lots of times. So we live in an academic community because my husband's a professor, and we are always doing participating in various campaigns for people friends, and also national level people who run for office and parades and all kinds of parties. And there's always crazy things happening, and we go on trips, and we're just my kids are very game.
Good.
So I remember it was on a Saturday morning, and it was right after I had told my parents, because I knew I wanted to tell my parents before I told my kids, because I didn't want them to have to feel like they were in a position of keeping it quiet at all. Because I did feel when this was all over, I was like, secrets aren't good. It's not good to have this stuff growing beneath the surface. And I wish that, we hadn't had these sort of hidden things in my upbringing that I didn't know were hidden at the time. But I definitely want to make sure with my kids that they feel really comfortable with the truth all the time. So when I told them, we were standing at my kitchen island, it was a Saturday morning, and I was like, you guys, we have something big to tell you. And one of them looks at me and says, are you pregnant? No, I guess I was still 46. I was 46.
Yeah.
And then I'm pretty sure that one of them said, are we going to Disney World? And I was like, no.
Damn.
Not now, but we'll go again. And I was like, actually, we have a whole new family. And they were like, wait, what? And they were it took them a minute to piece it all together. My daughter was 12 and a half and my son was 17. So they're old enough to understand, and they understood it really quickly. And then, like 2 weeks later, we were packing up to go to New York. And when we were driving from the bar mitzvah, for my friend's son's bar mitzvah, to meet the new family for dinner, I was acting so, like, I was so wound up. I'm like, this is a very unusual. I was just really nervous to meet them, but I was really excited. And I think my daughter was like, are you going to start acting normal again when this part is over? But they were super charming at that first dinner. And my daughter looks and acts and has the temperament of my husband, but my son looks and has the temperament very much like me, like very, very much. So like my bio dad, like it's really sort of uncanny and hilarious. So when he met him, he was like, oh yeah, like this all makes a lot of sense. And then later, like in January, when my husband came to New York, the four of us had dinner, and my bio dad and his wife and me and my husband. And I think it was like a 3-hour dinner, because when you put us together, like I love to talk and he loves to talk. We have like a lifetime of things to talk about. And my husband was just standing there like watching, and he was amazed and also so amused, because it's so clear that we are so much alike. And he was like, yeah, this is like not a question.
I love it.
Yeah, we really do. We get so tickled when we hear these stories with, these kind of results.
I took a class that was called Polish Your Show for Fringe. So the big Fringe festival is the one in Edinburgh, but there are small Fringe festivals all over the place. I knew I wanted to figure out how to tell this story, but it took me years to figure out what's the best way to tell it. So in taking this class, I realized I do have a 30-minute story. I knew I had a story, but I didn't know if I would be able to put it together in a 30-minute show. And I realized I was. And then the teacher of the class is a wonderful solo show artist and performer and actor, writer and director. Her name is Aris Barr. And for fans of Curb Your Enthusiasm, they may recognize her because she's the actor who played the Orthodox Jewish woman who gets stuck on the ski lift with Larry David. So she's been in tons of other things. She put together a festival in the East Village in New York City for the first week of September. And I applied for the festival and I got in. It's one long weekend, and I've been working with her. She's directing the show, and I'm sharing a time slot with a stand-up comedian. So we both have stories about growing up and finding ourselves and considering issues of identity. And I'm really happy with how the show turned out. I'm really happy that it's going to be both available in person and also on live stream. So the Sunday show is sold out, which I can't even believe that it's already sold out. We're 2 weeks from the show. The show on the 6th, which is Saturday night at 9 p.m. in New York City, still has tickets available. And it's also available for anyone to watch Saturday night or Sunday evening from anywhere. So tickets for that can be found at frigid.nyc. The theater is called Under St. Mark's. The group that presents the shows at Under St. Mark's is called Frigid, which is FRIGID, like cold, frigid.nyc. Tickets are on that link. And also on my website, I'm Becca Raldsman. People can follow me on Instagram. I don't post comedy videos yet because I'm still relatively new in the world of comedy, but I do travel all around and I love performing live. So I would love if people heard me on this, if they came to my show when I come to visit where you are. I mainly am in Birmingham, Alabama, but I do visit New York and Los Angeles almost every few months. And I would be thrilled if people wanted to watch the show on the live stream, or if you're in New York, to come see it on Saturday night, September 6th at Under St. Mark's.
Is it, do you understand how cool it is that you're doing your first one-person show in New York City?
I know. I'm like, it's all very much part of this whole thing of like, I'm going to be open-minded and I'm going to do all of these things because like life is short. So if there's a thing that you want to do, you should do it. So I didn't even realize this was a thing I wanted to do until 3 years ago, but I'm having so much fun. And I recognize that the world is a very challenging place, especially right now. So I do like doing this thing that builds connection with people and brings little bits of joy. And it's been super fun to be a part of it. So both in the show and also this whole wild experience that I've had.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely miss the performance side of things. In fact, that's how Kendall and I met, over 20 years ago. That I was also performing with a sketch comedy troupe at the time. And it's hard to fit everything in, but I feel like I get some of that satisfaction by doing our podcasts.
Absolutely. And it's really true that doing creative things and making art in any capacity is a really good antidote to when things are feeling really difficult everywhere else. To making art is still a super important part of life.
So, as a listener to our show and a very creative person, I'm very curious about the answer to this question. And it's one we started asking guests pretty recently, because in our other podcast, as a horror podcast, we always ask people, like, who's your favorite final person who lives in a horror movie? Well, for this, we have been asking guests, when you're kind of in the feels and you're kind of like in, not sure how you're feeling about the whole found family situation and discovery, is there a song or a musical artist that you turn to?
Oh, it's such a good question. So, okay, I have a double answer. My daughter is 15, so she was 12 and a half when Taylor Swift launched her Eras tour. And my daughter claims that she's been a Swiftie since 2014, but she was 5 years old, so I don't know that that's entirely true. So my daughter has introduced me to the world of Swiftiedom, and I am obsessed. So like, there is a Taylor Swift song for every occasion, and there is like, whenever I think that I have heard all of her music and I could not love it more, I discover a whole new song. Like, do you guys know the song Hits Different, which is a bonus track at the end of Midnight? It's like, most people don't even know that that's a song, and it is my very favorite Taylor Swift song. So I love the idea that Taylor Swift has all of these like vault tracks and bonus tracks and hidden things that like people don't even know about. So it's more of the idea of that there's just these layers, and you have to keep digging and you learn more and more and more.
Yeah.
So that is one thing, but also the song Once in a Lifetime by Talking Heads is one of my very favorite songs. And there is this line in the song that says, "How did I get here?"
Yeah.
So I think about that whenever that song is from the point of view of a guy, but I do, because he like talks about my beautiful wife and kids, but I hear that and I'm thinking like, yep, how did I get here?
Yeah. Now that we definitely relate to that. The 80s are huge in our house. We can't claim to be Swifties, but we totally respect and love what she does. And she discovered pretty early on like how important it is to be a good marketer these days. I mean, her marketing and the way that she rolls stuff out, and I just think it's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Like chef's kiss to whoever's guiding that train.
But the other thing that I learned from her more than anything else is if you listen to her songwriting, she's so vulnerable and authentic in it. And that is really a scary thing to do. In that particular way, I've sort of looked to Taylor and thought, okay, she's telling the entire world how she thinks about everything at any given moment. And she's being really brave about doing that. So that was particularly useful to me when I have thought, oh, how can I do this show? And I'm like, okay, not that many people are going to really watch it and listen to it.
But think about like among her millions of fans, how much she's going to be able to help people who have their own discoveries, finding out they're adopted or donor conceived, so it's like if they can lean on Taylor and lean on her music to help them partially get through that, then great.
You guys should listen more. I think you'll be very happy.
Cool.
I know the older stuff, like the older radio hits when she was just going from country to pop, but I haven't listened to the last few albums, and I think it's time to go.
You were in for such a treat. I want you to circle with me and tell me how much you fall in love with them. On Your Own, Kid, and Hits Different are the two most magical songs.
Okay.
And then Torture Poets has a whole other, there's so many, and I'm not even getting into folklore, and I could talk about her for a whole other hour.
Oh, wow.
Well, there's your next show, right?
Yes, the world of magic of Taylor Swift. Thank you guys so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Becca. And we really applaud your bravery and turning this story into art. The arts are so important, especially these days. And I've been preaching that for, since way before the troubled times we're in now, and I always go back to, I kind of befriended Carol Channing in her later years. And she and her husband, who she found after they were like high school sweethearts and found each other 60 years later, and they were so involved in the arts and stuff. And I got to see her speak at her former high school when they were dedicating the theater to her. And it's just like, and to hear her talk about the arts and touch these kids, and these kids were crying, and it's just like, Thank you. We need more folks like that, especially now that she's passed.
Oh, that is really special, though.
It was cool.
Yeah. Wonderful. Becca, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. We totally appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much.
You're
I
so
really
welcome.
appreciate it. It was so fun to talk to you both, and I hope I get to meet you sometime.
You
Absolutely,
will.
you will, for sure.
Okay, take care.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Not everybody takes a donor-conceived surprise and thinks, you know what, I should put this on stage in New York City. But that's exactly what Becca's going to do, and the world is going to be better for it. She turns secrets into storytelling, family shock into comedy, and the whole experience into a show. If that's not proof that laughter and truth make great partners, I don't know what is. Thanks for tuning in once again. And remember, family secrets are the ultimate plot twist. The Family Twist podcast is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications and produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.